Hey, welcome back. It's episode, what is it? I've lost where I am. 159. That's why I've lost it. Still going. Anyway, what have we got? Yeah, Gemini 4 and using it for your personal AI assistant. Okay. Before you ask, yes, more of that. Right, but first of all, it was an interesting article really, because I think 2025 was definitely the year of, or the birth of AI agents. I mean, that's a bit broad, isn't it? But I think it certainly kicked off a lot of the agentic sort of coding platforms and obviously other stuff. And I just read recently that, you know, there's a lot of hype around this, but how many AI agents are actually really in production? Apart from the trivial stuff, you know, so because obviously there's a lot of guardrails that are needed for this stuff. And especially, you know, I mean, if you're doing things like the sales and marketing type thing, where you're doing research and all of that, I get it. That's fine. But you know, I think where it's doing critical stuff, you definitely need guardrails and, you know, observation from a human to check things are going. And we only have to mention things like OpenClaw that OpenAI bought fairly recently, as I mentioned before. So you can see sort of where that's going probably. But also with OpenClaw, and then you've got all this stuff like co-work in Anthropic Claude. And they, talking about Anthropic, they, from the time of this recording, when was it? 2 or 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, whatever, they released I've forgotten what they actually call it, but it's like essentially it's Claude computer use. So it's only available on a Mac at the moment, but you can set it up now. I guess OpenClaw, you know, it's probably getting developed, and there was a lot of things about how unsafe it was and doing things, but I think like everything, it will evolve, and people are using it. You know, I've seen people with multiple OpenClaw sub-agents doing lots of interesting things, but you've got to be a little bit either brave or really know what you're doing setting that thing up, you know. So but anyway, this is all very interesting. But yeah, Claude computer use now on a Mac, obviously, just at the moment of the time of this recording anyway, lets you do loads of stuff like even co-work, which has been in Claude for a little while now, not too long, but you know, we'll do things like, you know, you can say, well, I'm in the UK, so you can say, hey, go to the browser, go log into my shopping account and order my usual shopping list or something like that. And obviously, if you're a little bit crazy like I am, I've got my supermarket. It's got my, you know, stored payment detail in there for better or worse. But anyway, it can do that. It can actually do some non-trivial stuff. If you're brave enough or stupid enough like me. But anyway, all of this is really interesting. And the other little snippet is that Microsoft 365 I can't remember the names. I wish they'd come up with some standard names. Anyway, 365 Copilot, they've literally just recently in the last few days announced that it's a bit of a, I don't think it's a pivot, but it's an addition, certainly, because obviously for a long time, Microsoft have had the partnership with OpenAI. But now they have got the co-work from Anthropic, from Claude. So they're now having the co-work sort of experience within Microsoft 365 Copilot. So anyway, it's all a scramble, isn't it? It's okay. And the thing is, and I'm the worst culprit really for the FOMO, fear of missing out, of trying to keep up with all this stuff. But I think like everything, you just have to let the dust settle and pick what works for you. Okay, so for me, I did have a play with OpenClaw, but you know, there was a bit of technical setup there and whatnot. But through looking at, and to be honest, I definitely got inspired from other people using, or creating their own versions of OpenClaw. So I'm not taking any credit for, wow, this is an original idea. I don't think there are many original ideas anymore, are they? So anyway, like I said, I used a base of looking at a couple of other examples, but I really wanted to build my own personal assistant, in air quotes, just to see what is actually going on. What makes this, and again, credit to OpenClaw for all the plumbing that the guy did to create all that, because there's an awful lot. Like we all know, it isn't just one little bit of something that works. There's so much infrastructure and plumbing around to make all this stuff happen. So in my case, I really wanted to see how crazy you could go with this, and obviously everybody was running out buying Mac Minis because they thought, oh, you have to have a Mac Mini to run OpenClaw. No, you don't. It's just running a set of programs and on a schedule and stuff like that. You can run it on any machine, absolutely any machine. I even saw an article where someone's using a Raspberry Pi, one of those little, whatever, 20 quid, 30 quid, they've probably gone up a bit now, haven't they? Raspberry little Pi computers that you can do. So there's no excuse. There's no excuse. You can run it on any machine. And I decided, there's no advertising on this channel yet, unless you want to. Anyway, always open. But anyway, I ended up using, because it's something I've used occasionally over the years. I used AWS Lightsail. So it's Amazon Web Services, but they bought Lightsail, which was a separate company years ago. By the way, all of these, there's loads. Is it Hertzner or something in Europe, and Hostinger and all these ones? Although I noticed Hostinger and stuff like that, I think they're capitalizing on the fact that people just want a ready-built OpenClaw VM. So it was, to be honest, it was a little bit pricey, but anyway, whether you want to use, it doesn't matter what you want to use. You can use this on your own infrastructure if you want, like I said, but I decided to use Lightsail because it's a hosted VPS, virtual private server. It's running Ubuntu Linux, and it's costing me $3.50 or something a month, which in UK money is, I say trivial. I don't want to trivialize, because even a couple of quid is a couple of quid, but it's sort of that. Okay. And so that is where, and it's just running Ubuntu Linux. No UI, no nothing. And by the way, one of the important things that I wanted to do is make sure that it wasn't open to the world. Like a lot of things, you've got to think about security. And so that was one of the important things. So I'm also on that server. I'm using something called PM2, which is a process manager. It's a background daemon background service that keeps the services alive, keeps things checking, polling and checking for what's going on. And then for messaging, to actually communicate with my assistant, of course I've used Telegram, because it is one of the easier sort of chat apps to hook up. WhatsApp isn't particularly difficult. It's just there's a few more hoops and loops that we have to jump through. Okay, so I use Telegram. You can create a Telegram bot, and like I say, there's loads of articles and videos. I should do a video at some stage to show how straightforward it is to do this. But so Telegram is, I suppose, the primary chat interface. You can say, hello, what's what. I do have Twilio, which is excellent. It's got a real phone number. And again, it costs pennies a month to have this. None of this is expensive. That's why I chose this sort of stuff. But you get a real phone number. And although I've got Telegram on my phone, just for a bit of fun, I can actually call in with just from a normal phone and ask my agent stuff. And spookily, because it can run background processes, I can say, well, look, go and check this, go and do that. I don't want to wait around at the moment. Just ring me back when you've done this. And sure enough, you'll get a telephone call and or telegram with your results, which is quite fun. Scares the hell out of you, if you're if you're just getting into your own work or whatever you're doing, and then the phone rings and it's like your AI agent calling you. But anyway, it's good fun. So that's Twilio for just a bit of extra fun interfacing with it. And then, because love it or hate it, I use the Echo devices. I won't say the name because it'll probably get loads of people's devices waking up. But I use that for, I've been playing with the Echo or the Amazon Echo sort of developer interface for a while. And so I can actually speak to my Echo device and do the same thing. So that was basically a skill that I created on the Echo, and it uses a Amazon Web Service Lambda function, which is basically a serverless function. So if you know Azure serverless functions, if you don't worry. It's a hosted API that you can interface, and it interfaces back down to my AWS Lightsail. So first of all, Twilio and Echo, the skill, do need access to my VPS. So when I said there's no ports open, I was lying a little bit, because there's 2 ports open, but they're whitelisted from those services only. Okay, so there's quite strict firewall policies involved there. So, but they're the only 2 inbound ports that are open. I'm not saying that it's completely unhackable or anything like that, but it's as locked down as I can see at the moment. Then on the integrations front, I'm using MCP, Model Context Protocol. So if you don't know about that, I've got a few chats about that as well. It's a way of it's an interface for AI LLMs to connect into other services, basically. I mean, I know it's a bit overused, but they call it the USB for large language models, USB-C if you want to be really official. But anyway, these MCPs let you connect into things like, I've got my Google Calendar for my home stuff, and then I've got an Microsoft 365 MCP for my personal Hotmail and my I've got a business email, nothing to do with my day job, by the way, but I've got another account that I connect into that. So, and then really I've got a local reminder schedule as well, which is my own MCP server. And really, don't worry, that's nothing more than if I say, oh, I just need to remember this for, Thursday at 8 o'clock, then it will do that. And there's loads of services that will do this, but this is my AI agent, assistant that will do this. So, and then the only other thing I've got in the mix is I'm using Superbase, which is an online, it's essentially Postgres SQL database, but with a lot of extras and lovely things. It's basically a hosted version of a database that's got some really good useful aspects, and one of them is I use Superbase. It's really just database tables to store the conversation history, which gives my assistant memory. So I can do things like, oh, remember last Monday I asked you about XYZ? It knows that. It can remember that. Okay. And then I use, because at the moment, from a pricing perspective, I use OpenAI's vector embeddings. Okay. What the heck is vector? Well, I've gone on long enough. I won't go into vector embeddings at the moment, but essentially it turns your text into meanings. Okay. And it groups those meanings together for semantic search. Okay. So, rather than it just storing text, it's got vectors, which are just big strings, big arrays of numbers. That's how a lot of these AI models work, is that it looks at meanings and the closest association of a word and all those sorts of things. So I use vector embeddings in Supabase as well. So the reason that's important is because if I'm saying things to my AI assistant, it has to combine what I'm sort of asking to the large language model. Okay, so that's where vector embeddings become really important. And PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL, if you want to say it like that, does have a semantic vector store as well. Now, by the way, a lot of the other databases do now as well. Microsoft SQL 2025 has got vector-enabled storage. Lots of other databases do that. There's loads of, and there's actually a lot of pure vector databases out there. I've forgotten the names of them, but the good thing is, because things like PostgreSQL, Supabase, SQL 2025 or whatever, you've got their normal database operations and vector operations. Okay, so there's a couple of local JSON files I use as well, and they use the local JSON for caching really common stuff that doesn't need to get refreshed every 5 seconds. So, for instance, because obviously one of the big things is cost of tokens. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a second. So what I do is, my personal calendar really doesn't change much, if at all, in a lot of ways. So every time I ask, what am I doing on Tuesday? Have I got any personal things on there? It would have to go through the MCP, which is the USB-C connector for the LLM, for want of a better phrase, and then go and check my Google Calendar. All of that is costing tokens, money, basically. Okay, so the idea is I can cache a lot of that stuff, and it does it by just pulling that information out as local JSON. And if you don't know what JSON is, it's just a textual version of data, and it stores that locally, so it doesn't have to go out. It doesn't have to use a lot of tokens, and it's optimized to do that, to not use up a load of tokens. Okay, and while we're on it, how does this even connect to these large language models? Well, I decided to use Anthropic Claude, and originally I was using Claude Code, CLI, which is the command line version, but these are all getting there's lots of policy changes from the likes of Microsoft and Anthropic and Google as well, how you use these CLIs. So what I ended up doing, my first iteration was using the Claude Code CLI, but I ended up just using the Anthropic AI SDK, the API. Okay, so you can sign up, put some credit on there, like $10 or something, and then your tokens are getting used against that API call. So all of this AI agent, I keep saying agent, the assistant, is ultimately using Anthropic's AI API. Okay, and that's the sort of final link in the chain, really, is which model do you use? Because obviously, as you know by now, if you use the higher frontier models, the big models, that they can start costing a lot of tokens, which equates to a lot of money. So I did a silly thing where, because you've got to do silly things, haven't you, to learn? But I ended up leaving my setting on Opus 4.6. Or was it? No, actually, I think it was even one of the earlier Opus models, but it was one of the expensive models. Yeah. And within about 2 hours, I got this notification from Anthropic saying, oh, your API has been limited. I thought, what the hell? That's when I realised that my background processing, this is of course where you learn by experience. My assistant was looking at my calendar stuff every few minutes. It's like, why? And every few minutes it was just calling off, costing me thousands of tokens. Luckily, like with all of these services, you've got to be careful. I always put a limit like of $10 or something silly like that. So I do this with Azure sort of services as well, or AWS. I put, the first thing I do is go make sure I've got a budget limit. So if I do something wrong or forget something, once it hits that limit, sure, the services will stop, but you won't be burning, hundreds of dollars or something silly. So the idea is, anyway, I learnt my lesson very quickly on that one. So I added a bit more credit, and then I ended up using an AI routing, whichever way you want to call it that, a model routing option. So what I ended up with is a crude way of doing it. Basically, if I'm just asking simple things like what's on my calendar, as so-and-so emailed me on my personal account or my business account, things like that, you can use maybe the Haiku models or something from Anthropic. By the way, none of this is limited to just Anthropic Claude. You could use this with OpenAI, and I'll come to the point of this rather long episode in a minute, but the model routing will do things like, if I ask a bit more complex question, and it sort of assesses that, to be honest, but it will then go, I'll use the Sonnet 4.6 model for this, and only in really rare cases will it use the Opus 4.6 model, but that I've told it to be extremely, it's a rare occasion, only when I'm asking really complex things. But for the most part, and I can say with hand on heart, I've been running this for 2 months now. And after my faux pas with burning through thousands of tokens, I can honestly say I put another $10 US on there at the time. And it has been about 2 months. I'm at about $7 out of my 10 after 2 months. So it is going to cost money of some sorts, but it's relatively minimal. And you could say, well, what is the real value? Can't you just go and look on your phone for the calendar and stuff like that? Yeah, you can, but that's not the point, is it? But at the same time, this was more of a thought exercise as well, to try to see all of these components, how do they fit together? And by the way, with all the AI coding now, I have to say, it's not that tricky to actually build. You do need to know some pointers and things like that. And if you want to build one yourself, sure, you can go and get an off-the-shelf open claw thing and all the rest of it. But if you want to do even a minimal version of this, let me know in the comments, because I'm going to be going through. I keep saying this, but I am actually going to do a walkthrough of how this was built, really, because it's not rocket science. And even if you've got minimal or, just a curiosity of coding, you should be able to follow along with this. I kid you not. And the whole point is, like I said, you don't have to have thousands of dollars at your disposal to do this, for sure. You can do it very minimally. And like I said, the AWS Lightsail thing, or whatever other VPS, there's DigitalOcean, there's loads of them out there. You can have the most basic Linux VM running, because ultimately it's you talking to it, and it doesn't need a massive amount of processing power to do this. So anyway, after all of that, 24 minutes, for goodness sake. If you're still here, you're thinking, what was the title about, Gemini for? Well, Google just released Gemini 4, and my notes have gone out the window, which is probably not a bad thing at this stage. But anyway, the idea is Gemini 4, there's a whole host of these models, but they're doing, like you've heard of, no doubt, Quen and 5.5 and what all these other local models where you can run like Olama or you know, these local versions of AI models, which are getting really quite clever. Okay, Quen for coding isn't bad, but I wouldn't use it for, you know, really intense programming sort of stuff. But Gemini 4, I have to say, and I gave my old laptop a bit of a benchmark of saying, right, it's an Intel 11th generation. It's a good 5, 6, 7 years old. It's an i7, Core i7, and it's got, what, 20 gig of RAM for some reason. But there's no GPU. And apparently Gemma, I keep calling it Gemini. It's Gemma that I'm talking about. The local model, I do apologise. But Gemma 4, which is the 2 billion parameter model, takes up about 5 to 7 gig of RAM, and it runs really quick on my machine. 4 billion parameter is about 10 to 12 gig of RAM that it needs, and this will run pretty reasonably on my laptop. Okay, if you're lucky enough to have something with a bit more oomph and all the rest of it, and even a GPU, for goodness sake, you can get up to the 26 billion parameter or the 31 billion dense parameter, but you do need 20 gig plus of RAM for the model itself, and you really do need a GPU and stuff like that. But the reason I'm saying all of this is because what I mentioned earlier about I'm using the Anthropic models like Opus and Haiku and Sonnet and things like that. Okay, I've got a model routing thing going on there, or routing, and that is, you know, working quite well for me. But what if I could use something like Gemma 4 or something like that, so that it's a complete local model on that VPS, so it doesn't have to do anything? And I'm quite seriously going to try that, because most of what I'm asking from this personal assistant is your everyday stuff, really. Every now and again, by the way, I forgot to say that the AI assistant has got web access, obviously, so I can tell it to go and say, you know, what's the latest weather, dare I say, or, you know, what's going on, or can you recommend this, or whatever. You know, if you're looking for, I don't know, a new phone or something, go and research new phones in this price range, blah, 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 and call me when you've done that. Yeah, it can do all things like that. Okay. But I'm thinking of trying to integrate Gemma 4 so that it doesn't even need to cost anything more than just the cost of the VPS, the VM. Okay. Sure, I might need to increase that VM a little bit, memory-wise and stuff, but I'm going to try with the 2 billion or the 4 billion 2 billion or 4 billion parameter models, because they're reasonable. They're in the, okay, I can afford that for a VM sort of thing. So that is what I'm going to try on this weird adventure. This is nearly 30 minutes. I think instead of just 5 minutes, it's just going to be called Just Shut Up, basically. I think that's probably what I should rename the channel to. But anyway, it's all fun. It's all good experience doing this sort of stuff. So anyway, wherever you are in the world, have a good day, a good week, and I will catch you on the next one.